The time a Chicago labor union posted fat furry porn to its official Facebook page, igniting a Nazi communist furry war. In January of 2020, this Facebook page inexplicably posted furry fan art in support of workers' rights. But this was no ordinary colorful fan art, because this was furry porn. And in no time at all, this post would go absolutely viral, forcing the labor union to answer a very uncomfortable question. Did they know? The answer is gonna floor you. But before we can get there, because of the huge overlap of communists and furries within this community, this was not your ordinary furry porn. This was made for a higher cause. Because this furry porn was made to fight the Nazis. Today's art history lesson, fat furry fetish art and the battle against fascism. On January 27, 2020, the Greater Chicago Industrial Workers of the World Facebook page posted this furry art with the caption, "The best cure for a case of the Mondays is one big union." It depicts a morbidly obese skunk with the IWW logo crushing a stereotypically rich fox-type creature underneath its massive fupa. While it may not be obvious to you, this is furry porn, and it's called fatfur to be specific. According to Wikifur, fatfur is a subcategory of feederism fetish art, which focuses on weight gain and helplessness and just generally being fat. Not to be confused with inflation, which is strictly about becoming huge, but not fat, due to being filled with air. Very important distinction. And you'd be forgiven for conflating the two, because these are some of the most popular genres of furry fetish art since the beginning of time. From DeviantArt to Fur Affinity to Twitter, this fetish subset is absolutely everywhere. And it's no surprise that in a political community disproportionately filled with furries, this would eventually breach containment. And that brings us to this post, because this fat fur fetish art was commissioned to clap back against the rise of alt-right furries within the community, and we'll get into exactly how that is. But first, a quick timeline. January 27th, the Facebook post. January 28th, Twitter user Space Drugs takes a screenshot and posts it with the question, "Is someone going to tell them?" Also January 28th, the Daily Dot publishes an article suggesting that the International Workers of the World official Facebook unknowingly posted furry art. And the IWW's response was absolutely goated. The IWW tweeted back, and I quote, "Unknowingly, winky face." This sent the furry community into an absolute tailspin. This was not oblivious boomer posting. This was malicious. Someone did this on purpose. Someone at the International Workers of the World knew what furries were, knew this was fetish art, knew people could tell, and hit send post. But who would possibly do this? We'll get there in a minute. Meanwhile, the community had erupted into furry-on-furry violence. On the one hand, you had people saying that this was funny, this was based, and it was good representation for their community. On the other, you had people complaining that this made it impossible for anyone to take furries seriously, and that it exposed a non-consenting audience to fetish art, which was a legitimate complaint, and also that it potentially reinforced the beliefs of Nazi furs. But let's be real for a second. How serious was the Nazi furry problem? It actually was. Furries are a massively diverse group of people with dissenting opinions in politics, and where you have a hyper-accepting group, you often get snakes in the grass. Nazi furries do exist as an extreme minority, but some of the best-known furry convention scandals of the last 10 years have been tied back to Nazi furry trolling. However, one thing almost any furry can agree on is their love of furry art, so what better way to clap back at the furry Nazi chuds than in a language they understand? Remember, you can start out irony poisoned, but sooner or later that cognitive dissonance will kick in, and you'll find yourself sieg-heiling in a hot, sweaty fursuit outside a DMV. So the furry community had cause for concern. This was potentially a PR nightmare. Normal people simply did not understand this stuff, and the International Workers of the World Twitter was no small account. It was followed by Bernie Sanders. And dozens of furries in the replies voiced their dissent, understandably worried about how the workers' rights community would look at this. But it was about to get much worse, or better, depending on your side of the aisle, because the IWW doubled down. January 29th, 2 days after the original post, the fighting was at a fever pitch, and a smaller account affiliated with the IWW made things even worse by tweeting the following: "If you run a business or make a living from commissions making fursuits, you have a place in Textile and Leather Workers Industrial Union 410. And in case anyone was still unsure of the position on the furry question overall, the original Facebook poster who started it all had this to say: We believe that when workers come together as a unit, they can overpower their bosses. We originally took the meaning of the image to be in reference to this principle. While we have no official affiliation with the furry community, we appreciate that furry workers hold the same values of worker power and welcome them in our union the same as any other worker. So did they know? Yes. Did they care? Absolutely not. Does this art actually fight Nazis for real? The answer is genuinely really interesting, because there's a huge missing component of the story that we're not talking about. Who actually drew this? And how does it relate to bashing the fash? A tragically overlooked part of the story is that the original artist was never given any credit, because no one has been able to track them down. But I think I have a pretty good lead. If you look closely, this illustration was signed Eileen 2019. And after searching through Fur Affinity and Twitter, I found an account belonging to one Eileen Samoyed. While I'm not 100% certain this is her, and I haven't been able to contact to ask, the art style and subject matter are freakishly similar, like down to even the exact same fetish. Though I haven't been able to find this particular commission anywhere in this artist's works. And I want to state for the record that if this isn't the actual artist, if this is the kind of art you enjoy, please show her your support. Now, as for the Nazi thing, quick history lesson. In Weimar, Germany, right before World War II, there was an explosion in the subversive art scene, and as Nazis rose to power, they made an effort to distinguish between good culture and degeneracy. And you may notice this rhetoric if you're ever on alt-right Twitter. Tons of what we might understand as modern art was destroyed in degenerate art purges. It was burned, it was torn apart, and the artists were typically persecuted. So how does this relate to fat furry fetish art? Well, whether it was the artist's intention or not, the choice to create a very uncomfortable viewing experience for an average person, combined with featuring a body type often considered unattractive, follows the subversive tradition of bucking against the wider culture. So in a really roundabout way, this artist did kind of stick it to the Nazis of old. But back to the present day. This shitpost doesn't seem to have affected the international workers of the world or any of their social media in any lasting way. While the offending tweet was since deleted, which was probably the right move, its impact can still be felt in the tons of tweets and Tumblr threads that it left behind documenting this explosive phenomenon. And as for the person who commissioned the art, we know who that is. Kinda. The Daily Dot article profiles the anonymous user Jay using a pseudonym, and he explains his thought process. I see far-right furries involving politics and laugh my ass off, so I thought it'd be funny to do it for politics me and my friends actually like. Most of the fandom leans fairly left-wing, and I felt like people might get a laugh out of it. I didn't really expect the image to spread as far as it did. But as quickly as fat fur fetishists are willing to spread their legs and their wallets, so too did this image spread across Twitter for several unforgettable days. And while this would quickly be overshadowed by the other big news event of early 2020, it was memorable nonetheless. And at the end of it all, to quote Jay, it was just really funny. This has been an art history lesson.